Hello and welcome. I'm James Milan, and I'm here with Stephen Kerrigan, who's a Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Thanks for coming in and talking with us today.
Thank you, James. Appreciate you having me.
We're going to get right to reviewing the format of this interview. It will be a live-to-tape interview, and that means that there will be no edits once we begin. There was no pre-screening of questions, and the answers will be limited to a strict 2 minutes each. We will start with a 1-minute opening statement from the candidate, and after the questions, we will conclude with a 1-minute closing statement. So, Mr. Kerrigan, you have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Thank you, James. Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for having me here today. I'm a excuse me. I'm a candidate for Lieutenant Governor, a Democrat running to be your next Lieutenant Governor, and I'm running because I want to get government back in the business of solving problems. I've seen throughout my entire career that government, when it works together with community leaders and business leaders and citizens alike, that we can solve any problem and make our Commonwealth shine even brighter than it does today. I've had a chance to serve my community as a selectman and a finance committee member, a chance to serve the Commonwealth in the Attorney General's office, and to serve our country working for the late, great Senator Ted Kennedy. And Senator Kennedy taught me that an awful lot of great things can get done if we work hard, if we don't let obstacles get in the way, if we stick to our principles, and if we don't care who gets the credit. I want to get to work for you each and every day of this next administration to fight for you, the people of Massachusetts. But I need your help and I need your vote on September 9th in the Democratic primary. So thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
We're going to get right into the questions now, and I probably don't need to remind you, but I will anyway. It'll be two minutes, and I'll be strictly
I'll do the best
that.
I can.
Great. So, first question, why are you running for Lieutenant Governor, and what prepares you to serve in this capacity?
Sure. Well, as I said in my opening remarks, I'm running because I do believe government can play a powerful role in people's lives, and I've seen it every day. I've seen it working in Senator Kennedy's office when we worked with fishing community folks in Gloucester and New Bedford on the critical issue of providing them health care, where they were the highest risk pool of employment in the entire country, and previous to our meeting with them, they could not get coverage. We went to work the next day, and we got business leaders, nonprofit leaders, government leaders at state and federal level, and we put together a plan in the mid to late 90s that provided health care for 1,800 families, which had previously not been done. I've also seen it, in communities when I was a selectman and working in Senator Kennedy's office, working to wire schools all across Massachusetts through net day programs to make sure that we move Massachusetts from 37th in the nation to 16th in the nation in 18 months. I mean, government can be a powerful force in people's lives, but we've got to have government and a governor and a lieutenant governor who can get people around the table and keep them working tirelessly on the issues that people care most about here in Massachusetts. And I've had a career in public service, and I want to take the experiences I've had, not just in government, but in the nonprofit world and working with the business community to work for people in Massachusetts.
Thank you. The Lieutenant Governor is a constitutional position. What benefit do you think the Lieutenant Governor brings to the Massachusetts state government?
I've been campaigning, as we were talking off camera, James, for 19 months. And I've had a chance to travel the entire Commonwealth many times, and we'll do it many more times over the course of the campaign and our time in office. But what I've seen is you talk to mayors or selectmen or city councilors or local elected officials, veterans advocates, transportation advocates, folks who work in the housing and homeless communities. And those folks miss having an advocate in the Lieutenant Governor's office. They miss having someone that they can pick up the phone and call to advance their issues or to frankly just help them out, which is why I want to serve as the ombudsman for state government. So I want to work as the voice for folks all across Massachusetts, not just mayors, although I've been endorsed luckily by 14 mayors across Massachusetts and countless local elected officials, but not just them, but work for business leaders, for nonprofit leaders, and for citizens alike to make sure they have a voice in state government. And frankly, we've got to get government back in the business of doing what it says it's going to do. People want to trust government, but they don't anymore. And there's a colossal lack of trust and faith in government. And I believe we've got a lot of work to do in this next administration to build back that trust. Because when we do, then we can talk to the taxpayers about the investments that we need them to make in the future in terms of early childhood education, investments in transportation infrastructure, and job growth and job creation that are going to be critical to the next 10 to 25 years of Massachusetts.
Thank you. What do you think this is a long question, so bear with me.
Sure.
What do you think is the appropriate role of state government in dealing with the economy and job growth? And what are the biggest issues facing the Massachusetts economy, and what policy priorities would you support to address those challenges?
The first thing I want the next governor to do is to appoint me the day after the election, not the day after the primary, the day after or not the day after the inauguration, but the day after the election, because it's too important. I want he or she to appoint me to chair a competitiveness council, because, as I mentioned, folks have lost faith and trust in government, and I believe we have an obligation to the taxpayers to show them that we're doing everything we can to give them a government worthy of the sacrifices that they make. So I want to look at all aspects of life across Massachusetts, from job creation to tax credits to a quality of life to how we're educating our kids, all of that, to really make sure that we are moving as competitively as we can. Get some ideas, listen to as many people as possible. Consumers of government and those who work in government are the folks who probably have the best ideas about how we can make government better. I also want, as part of that, to run a government efficiency and effectiveness project. That'll make sure that our Massachusetts state government is running on all cylinders and performing as highly as it possibly can be. Folks want government to do what it says it's going to do. When they say they're going to protect the most vulnerable children among us, they want government to do that. When they say they're going to issue medical marijuana licenses in a fair, equal way, they want them to do that. So we've got to regain that trust. When we do, that's when we'll find ways where we can create pathways to more strong economic growth. We can find real initiatives and ideas for how we're going to move Massachusetts forward. And then afterwards, when we've started to gain back that trust of the voters, we can talk to them about the return on investment you will get from projects like making sure that we're providing better access to affordable child care, make sure we're dealing with the opiate issue, not just in more beds for treatment, but in giving kids wellness classes in school so they understand, dealing with behavioral and mental health issues. All of these factors add to a more competitive Commonwealth. A more competitive Commonwealth adds to more job growth and stronger economies across Massachusetts. It can't just be about economies inside of 128. We've got to create stronger economies.
Moving on to the next question, excuse me. The Commonwealth's transportation infrastructure is critical in supporting the economy we were just talking about. And what are your priorities for supporting the Commonwealth's infrastructure, and how would your initiatives be funded?
Well, first and foremost, we've got to increase more Chapter 90 money to local roads and bridges. We've got to fulfill the $13 billion bond bill that we've got out there on major projects like South Coast Rail and expansions to the Green Line extensions and all that. Those projects are critically important. We've also got to give more money to Chapter 90 money, which is the local roads and bridges dollars, to give cities and towns an opportunity to fix the roads and bridges in their community. Taxpayers and Bay Staters travel over Massachusetts bridges, I think, over 100 million times a day in Massachusetts. And we have 10% of our bridges are deficient. The number's going down because we're working on it, and that's good. But we've got to make sure that we get there as quickly as we can, and then set a strong schedule. This all can't be based, all of our infrastructure improvements can't be based on emergent need. It has to be based on a strong capital improvement schedule. And our winters are tough, we get that, but we've got to, our roads and bridges are how our commerce moves and how our people move, and we've got to make sure that we build that. I also want to see us work on commuter rail that's not, I'm from central Massachusetts, proud Worcester County guy. I'd like to see commuter rail discussions that aren't just about bringing people in and out of Boston. I'd like to see commuter rail discussions about how we get around central Massachusetts, how you might get between different cities in western Massachusetts and give people an opportunity, because that's way, not only are you moving workers, but you're allowing people to live in Fitchburg but work in Worcester without owning a car, so it creates less of a burden on them but allows them to contribute more to the economy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What would you do about individuals without proper documentation in Massachusetts? What are the responsibilities of the state? What are the responsibilities of those individuals? And what, if any, are the responsibilities of the countries that they came from?
Well, I do believe that one of the issues that, a couple of the issues that we're dealing with, in-state tuition for undocumented people here in Massachusetts, I think is a no-brainer for those kids who were brought here through no fault of their own by their parents, and some left here than by their parents, and some whose parents remain. They should, if they've been raised in Massachusetts and gone through Massachusetts public schools, they should have access to in-state tuition. Some of whom, by the way, have gone to fight in our wars and come back and not been able to access, or hadn't been able to access previous in-state tuition. I think that's a critically important issue. I also think driver's licenses, to make sure that everybody who is operating a motor vehicle in Massachusetts is operating it with proper training and proper insurance and all those things. I think those are key issues. And then making sure that we're creating pathways to citizenship, working with our federal delegation. When I worked for Senator Kennedy, we did a lot of work in the immigrant communities all across Massachusetts and around the country to make sure we're providing the services and support for those folks who are rightly and properly in the pathway, and working with those communities who some are here as a refugee, whether they're legally here as a refugee or not. We've got to work with them to make sure that they get the services and support, and if they are going back home, that we create the proper steps to allow them to come back later through a legal, normal process.
What roles and responsibilities do federal, state, and local entities have in addressing energy policy? And are there circumstances in which federal policy should supersede state and local concerns?
Well, I think everybody has an obligation. Everybody every citizen has an obligation to make sure we're running a greener Commonwealth and a greener country. So we've all got to make our own choices about how our households are made more green. Our Commonwealth, when I was a selectman, we tried to move our standard heating system in the town hall from oil to geothermal. There was no state program to help us out, and we were a pretty cheap, poor community with not a lot of dollars to use, and so we ended up going with traditional, which was unfortunate because I would have rather provide that opportunity to the town. And I believe that's where the state can really step in. I think the state can step in when it comes to municipal buildings and schools and public safety facilities, and really provide a low to no interest loans and incentive programs so that folks can convert over. The governor has done a great job of growing our green economy job sector. Also done a good job of moving Massachusetts to a more eco-friendly state, and grown our renewable energies at a huge rate in the last 7 years. And I believe that's a great way that the Commonwealth can help. The federal government has an awful lot of work to do as well. I would love to get Congress to do anything, let alone work on an energy and environment policy. I talk a lot about people's obligation to vote and to get engaged, and I think when I think about climate change, we fought, when I was in the AG's office, we fought the George W. Bush administration in the United States Supreme Court on the issue of climate change and won, which was a proud day for us. But I think back to Election Day in November of 2000, and if 500 people woken up in Florida and decided differently, we'd have a national energy policy. We'd have a president. We would have had a president back then for 8 years who understood the issue of climate change, and they understood our obligation to our environment. So there needs to be some priority shifts on the national level in the legislature, and we've got to continue to mirror that here in Massachusetts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What role does the state have in reducing the achievement gap? If you do think the state government has a role, what policy priorities would you support to reduce the achievement gap?
Yeah, I do believe the state has a role. We've, in our Constitution, it calls for a free public education to every person in Massachusetts, and I think that's an important part of who we are as Bay Staters. So I believe that one of the first things we've got to do as part of the Competitiveness Council is look at all the foundation budgets, all of the formulas for how we're paying for schools in communities all across Massachusetts, and take them down to the studs and build them back up to accomplish what we need to today. Ed reform was 21 years ago. It was a great idea at the time and has had variable successes over the course of 21 years, but we were promised that we'd review the foundation budget every 3 years. We've reviewed it 3 times in 21 years, and that's not enough for me. And times have changed. And the achievement gap is a huge one. We've got to do early childhood education in communities that have a huge achievement gap. We've got to encourage teachers to move there and stay there and work there, and be able to grow the community there. And we've got to put resources into it. I would like to see us as a state, in poorer communities, every community in Massachusetts has a certain reimbursement rate from the School Building Assistance Authority, which the Treasurer's Office runs, that allows for construction of new and renovated schools. And so if you're poor, your reimbursement rate is much higher. If you're wealthier, it's lower. But that covers the hard costs of building a building. It doesn't cost. It doesn't provide for technology. So I would like the Commonwealth to start covering some of the soft costs of technology, which can help in a huge way in closing some of that achievement gap. But there's no doubt we've got to get to them earlier, get them smarter, better, harder working teachers who, they're great teachers in urban schools, but they don't stay there as often and as long as we'd like them to. I'd like to get them to stay there and continue to work there, and then give them the tools and the resources to do the job.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Do you support, and a warning that here's another multi-pronged question, do you support changes to the Chapter 70 education funding formula, including changes to the foundation budget? And if you do support changes, which changes would you like to see and why? And if you don't support changes, why not?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think a big piece of the Competitiveness Council is reviewing funding mechanisms across the board. Chapter 90, Chapter 70, the foundation formula, all state budget formulas, I believe, need to be reviewed. And not just every, 6 to 7 to 10 years. I think this needs to be a constant process, as all state government needs to. We can't just assume that things that have always been so should be such moving forward. And so from Chapter 70, I absolutely agree that we should, again, take it down to the studs and build it back up, because we've got to create more equity across Massachusetts to make sure that the funding is more evenly applied, and make sure that we're creating more opportunity across the state. My sister's a 5th grade teacher in Lunenburg, Mass, in Central Mass, and my mother has been the school secretary at our public elementary school for almost 40 years now, and they are communities right near each other. My sister has 28 kids in her class, 27 or 28 kids in her class this September in the 5th grade, and she shares an aide with 2 other teachers. In my mother's school, the average class size is about 18 or 19, and each of them get an aide. And so there's something broken there with the way the funding is broken down. And frankly, from funding across the board, we're not increasing unrestricted local aid or local aid in general at a high enough pace. We've got to get it back to where we were pre-recession, so that cities and towns who are forced to make the hard decisions in governing, they're given the resources to really get the job done. When I was a selectman in Lancaster, we had a situation with unfunded mandates with special ed funding, which special education legislation is the most important piece of legislation that we had in the 70s to provide an equal playing field. But we never provided the resources, which then just sets up the communities to battle each other about how you're going to pay that gap when the federal government and the state government don't pay their share.
Okay. And moving on to our last question.
Sure.
What strategies would you use for working with members of other parties and with others of opposing views? And what experience do you have implementing those strategies?
I often say, we'll be reminded over the course of the general election many, many times by the Republican opponents, there is an overwhelming majority in the legislature of Democrats, which I understand. But I often think that the biggest aisle to cross is not necessarily between Democrat and Republican in the legislature, but between the executive suite and the legislature. And I've been lucky enough to get the support of over 50 legislators. I'd like to work with them over the course of our time in office to realize our priorities. My old boss, Senator Kennedy, used to operate under the idea that a lot of great good can get done if you don't care who gets the credit. We've got to get folks back in that business. And I know there are hardworking folks elected to government at all levels who want to make a difference for their community, and we have really that obligation to do so. And so, through my time with Senator Kennedy, we worked with Republican Senate offices and Republican House offices. We worked, frankly, with Republican governors here in Massachusetts to advance the causes that we cared about and we thought would help the people of Massachusetts. And that's what it's about. I mean, it's not just about bipartisan, but it's about getting different views. I worked in Pittsfield. The people of Pittsfield had a plant there. General Electric had a 250-acre plant right in Pittsfield that had been in existence for decades, and they closed, throwing thousands and thousands of people out of business. But the plant itself was contaminated, and the river next to it was contaminated, and other sites around Pittsfield were contaminated. General Electric was willing to walk away and just board it up and spend 50 years in court. That wouldn't have benefited anybody but General Electric. And so we went to work. I spent almost 2 years on behalf of Senator Kennedy working out there with the EPA, with the DEP, with General Electric, with the city of Pittsfield, and we came up with a consent decree that allowed that facility to stay open. The city got cleaned, the site got cleaned, the river got cleaned to a certain extent further down. Now we're working on the rest of it moving forward.
Thank you very much. And that concludes this part of the interview.
Okay,
and we
great.
now invite you to make a 1-minute closing statement.
Sure. Well, thank you again, James, for having me here. This has been a great time. I've enjoyed the questions, and frankly, I've enjoyed the time limit because, as the preacher said, I could have written a shorter sermon, but once I get started, I get too lazy to stop. So I appreciate the limit. We've got a primary coming up on September 9th in the Democratic Party. It's incredibly important that we elect a ticket that can go on to win in November and really advance the priorities and values of the Democratic Party in November to help this next administration continue to move Massachusetts forward and advance some of the great things that Governor Patrick has done over the last 8 years. I need your help. I need your vote. I know I'm the candidate in this campaign who has the experience at all levels of government, who's worked with the nonprofit world and worked with the business community to get things done. And so I want to take my lifetime in public service and my experience as a problem solver and someone who gets the job done each and every day to work for you, the people of Massachusetts, as your next Lieutenant Governor. But I need your vote, September 9th. You can go to our webpage, stevekerrigan.org, to learn more about it. Thank you.
And we do want to thank Mr. Kerrigan for participating in our conversation today. Please make your voice count by voting at the state primary on September 9th. For Arlington Public News, this is James Milan. Thanks for joining us.